Well, yes, this is my first time in this community, and I'm really excited about meeting new people and hearing new ideas from systems perspective. Although I've been working in the Finnish Innovation Fund for a long time, and we work with these systemic problems in Finland all the time. So I will be talking about complexity governance that I've been doing research for the past few years, and I'm trying to explain why we are in this mess, which we all know very well. We have very complex crises happening all the time. Decision makers are puzzled, and citizens are suffering from anxiety and having problems with their everyday life and mental health. So the environment in which we live and work has changed considerably, and we haven't really learned to live in this new environment very well. My main argument will be that we are facing a general governance crisis at all levels of our society, ranging from individuals to organizations to governments and even multinational institutions. And the main reason, I think, for this governance crisis is that our old ways of thinking and doing things and organizing and our old institutional structures are not anymore up to the task. The increasing complexity and uncertainty of the world is overwhelming our old solutions at all levels of the society. And how have we come to this situation? There are multiple reasons. The first one is the historical industrial revolution that has been going on already for a few decades, but it's still going on. It's based on information technology, internet, and now recently on the artificial intelligence. And our societies and our lives haven't really adjusted to this change yet. I've done research on the long socioeconomic waves, which, by the way, is relevant to the previous presentation, and we can have a discussion about that too. And it seems, or it doesn't seem, we are in a situation where the new techno-economic paradigm has been running fast already for a couple of decades, but the old socio-institutional paradigm has not adjusted. Our institutions are still based on the post-Second World War era. And that creates increasing uncertainty, fundamental uncertainty in our societies. The second reason for the increasing complexity gap is the consequences of our fossil fuel powered previous paradigm, the mass production, mass consumption paradigm that we still live within. The third reason is the globalization of markets and the growing specialization and division of labor that it has allowed. The production processes are now extremely specialized globally. Of course, there's now the pushback from geopolitical crisis, but still we depend on highly interdependent processes which increase complexity in the economy. Then we have many more people around in the globe than before, and they are much more mobile than before, and hence we have many more actors affecting our systems than we have ever had before. And of course, behind this, we have this new information technology which has facilitated all these changes, but it's also increasing the pace of change and the information overload of the decision makers. And all these driving forces are being met with our established mental frames and institutional and organizational arrangements. So there is a growing mismatch between our mental capabilities and frames and the structures of our societies and these challenges that I've enumerated here. And this has caused governance crisis at all levels of the society. We know that we have increasing life management problems and mental health problems at the individual and household levels. We've had problems with large hierarchical organizations and corporations for a long time, and especially the private sector has moved away from these hierarchical organizations towards more network type of arrangements already for some 30 years or so. But the public sector is now following. I think the public sector woke up to this challenge maybe 10, 15 years ago. And we in Sitra are also working on this challenge in the Finnish public sector. Governments are struggling with these continuous crises and wicked problems, and there's widespread cognitive dissonance among the population and anxiety, as I mentioned before, which gives the opportunity for political demagogues and authoritarians who provide oversimplistic solutions to these very complex problems. And finally, we have multinational institutions that are struggling and pretty much stuck on their rails. So as you can see, we have governance problems throughout the society at different levels. Now, I found Ross Ashby's work and the law of requisite variety a very nice, simple framework to think about this governance crisis. And this framework comes from Max Boisot and Bill McKelvey's work. And they named it Ashby space, and it basically says that, as you know, that if you are facing complex problems, you should have at least as many potential responses as you will face different kinds of problems in order to be adaptive. My take on this framework, this Ashby space, is that this is actually popping up at different levels of the society in different research literatures. For example, the flow framework of Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi in the well-being research is very similar. And so is the key theoretical framework of work-life well-being. And it seems to me that this kind of simple framework can explain this governance crisis at different levels of the society. And what is even more interesting, it provides two key strategies for dealing with this governance crisis. The first one is complexity reduction strategy, which means that if you have unnecessary complexity in your system and you can reduce that, do that, because that helps you to reach a more adaptive situation. The other one is building variety in both your cognitions and your practical capabilities. And both of these strategies have these two components, the cognitive component, i.e. do you understand the complexity of the problem from enough variety of perspectives, and the other one is the structural one, which is that even if you understand the problem well enough in a holistic and systemic way, can you choose the best practical option to deal with the problem? Or are there technological constraints or capability constraints or regulatory constraints that prevent you from doing that? So you need both. You need cognitive requisite variety and you need structural and organizational variety. And then there are two possible limitations for your strategizing. The first one is that you should not oversimplify the problems like the political demagogues are doing at the moment, providing oversimplistic explanations to the problems. And the other one is a budget constraint, which is the vertical line there, that you can only diversify your behavioral options so much. You run out of resources if you try to do that too much. So you have to operate within these two strategic constraints, and very often you have to use both strategies. You have to have a combination of them to reach the requisite variety. Now, what I've done is to start writing a book. I first wrote an article, which is now finished, but I'm trying to write a book where I go through these 4 levels of the society and show that this same framework can explain the governance crisis at each of these levels. And I will show some examples of how we deal with this governance crisis at the individual, organizational, government, and the multinational level. And here's an example at the level of the society. I will not go through this, but you can see that these 2 strategies and their 2 dimensions can form a nice 2x2 matrix where you can analyze your ways of dealing with the complexity and uncertainty. I call them complexity governance mechanisms as a whole. I have done one case study of a system which is dealing very nicely with these new challenges, and that is the Eindhoven high-tech innovation ecosystem. And what I would like to emphasize here, I will not go through this either, but besides these 2 strategies for dealing with complexity and uncertainty, you also need a learning process through which you update and renew these complexity governance mechanisms. And in Eindhoven, they also have that kind of learning process. It's a multi-stakeholder learning process that takes place in different contexts through which they can update their governance mechanisms over time when the environment changes. And my final slide is about this collective learning process. You can see some familiar references here underneath. But the point here is that if you look at the different approaches to shared learning processes, you will find many similar aspects in them. And I've tried to synthesize these different literatures on collective learning and innovation processes into this picture. And basically what it does is that you come together with all the stakeholders to form situational awareness, and you will identify together the key challenges within the complex totality. And then you move to innovate on those key challenges and then set up projects to actually work and solve those sub-problems together in a coordinated manner. If you're interested, I can provide you with the paper and we can have further discussions, but I think I have to stop here to give some time for Jari.
Thanks, Timo.
Jari.
So Timo just showed learning and innovation process. And here's a backdrop that helps to make sense kind of the architecture behind these processes. And that is that of stratifying the complexity by the organizational levels. And the idea is not new. It comes from the fundamental sociological research from the 60s by Talcott Parsons and James Thompson. And later, Elliot Chuck did groundbreaking work on having a more granular and parsimonious model of requisite organization with 7 levels of complexity, abstraction. So basically, as per this scheme, combining Parsons-Thompson model and the requisite organization, we have 3 realms, so to speak. So the technical subsystem, which is the reliable production of products or delivery of service. Then managerial level that kind of bolsters that from the external perturbances and gives it reliable context. And then the institutional level that is the source of legitimation for the whole organization. And then we have the more detailed levels there. But the point is that the complexity is stratified by the level, and the social organizations are manifested through that. Then Timo mentioned this flow concept of Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi, which basically says that the challenge as per that level of complexity must be matched with the requisite capability on the other hand. And then when these 2 are in line, then both individuals and organizations and other systems are in a well-being flow state, and effectiveness and performance ensue. And then when there's a mismatch from this, for instance, the challenge transcends the capability or the variety of the system, then there's experience of perplexity, worry, and anxiety. So increasing misuse of that system or resource. On the other hand, there can be a disuse, which means that there's excess variety or excess repertoire of responses. And that's equally detrimental, so we have increasing frustration, then boredom, and also anxiety, using the terminology by Gilliam Stamp there. And I noticed a striking similarity to socio-technical systems research and its notions of adaptation and maladaptation. So adaptation basically means that the system has adequate repertoire of resources, responses, and reflective capacity to deal with the problems, like Timo showed on that Ashby space picture there. But then there's maladaptation and certain degrees to that, where these resources and affordances are inadequate in that context. And first order maladaptation has two forms. First is passive, which is, I term it defensive avoidance. So that's kind of ignoring that complexity that is around. Second one is active maladaptation, which means actually doing something about it, but with the logic that's not enough in that context. So it actually perpetuates the complexity and makes the turbulence worse. And then there's a second order maladaptation, which is then ossifying that maladaptive response, and it becomes chronic. So on the individual side, it was that anxiety, but this is also in the organizational context. So the organization can become chronically under-adapted in that context. So that's the second order maladaptation. But then I thought, okay, if this is equivalent to that misuse of that flow model, then what's the other side, the disuse here? And I was reflecting, maybe we could term it anti-adaptation, where there's excessive repertoire of resources, responses, and reflective capacity. And this is also not functional and adaptive in the system. And it also would have the passive and active tenor. So the passive could be termed as languid mentoring, and the active disruptive disconnect from that system. And then that also can become chronic, and that could be called dispirited deprivation. So this is where there's chronic excessive base of resources. Then going back to Timo's model of this complexity reduction and variety amplification. So here are some ideas of how cognitively we can reduce complexity. And first there is conceptual compression, and this means that it's kind of chunking to more usable mental concepts. I can give an example. In my PhD research, I was interviewing one corporate CIO, and at one point of the interview protocol, he said that he doesn't deal with details like creating a bank in Russia. And for some, creating a bank in Russia is like a huge endeavor, but he was looking at it from that top level, that it's just one thing to do, among other things. So that was an example of conceptual compression. Catalytic scaffolding is then to kind of prepare for second and third order consequences, put in motion things that come to fruition later on. And on that, this level, so we are now on the level of full-fledged sovereign organization, level 5 viable organization level. So the CEO or the president of that organization must be able to match the organization's internal resources with the external world 5 to 10 years down the line. So that's a really complex problem. So this catalytic scaffolding is about creating the structures that help the organization meet the challenge. And systemic weaving then is to bring together like more than 100 different threads that that leader has to deal with every day without going to details on any of them and without kind of ignoring important stuff either. On the variety amplification side, then some ideas how the cognitive means will play out. One is perspective taking. So it requires taking different perspectives in a fluid way. Second one, kairotic fluidity. This goes back to Said's presentation and the notion of sense felt time. So having that repertoire of going back and forth in time, past, now and future. And constructive reframing is then to come to individual epistemic conclusions based on different frames of reference. So that's some ideas of those. And then on that level, this is just an example. So I advocate that for each level we have different adaptive responses and different anti-adaptive responses. But here, just shorthand, things like tension avoidance is like avoiding the tension of opposites, for instance, and just adopting one of the ends. Temporal myopia, that's familiar to all of us, so the quarterly capitalism, that we just look to the next quarter. Perspective narrowing, like filtering out noise or perceived noise that is not seemed relevant, but that would be relevant in that situation. So, for instance, if you are a functional leader and just promoted to that organizational leadership, you may still be seeing things from that more narrow perspective. Then on the active maladaptation side, perimeter synthesis, so coming to a conclusion, but like expediting that and not taking all the nuances and paradoxes into account. Narrative overdrive means that you have a big vision, but maybe not scaffold enough how to get there, what kind of architecture will bring you there, just have this hollow proclamation that let's be digital or something. Stakeholder contortion is that you have several stakeholders and you listen to any of them at the time, but don't really integrate them into a trade-off conclusion. And then when things ossify, become more crystallized, then monolithic dogma is that you stick with one truth and one truth only. Maybe referring back to what Timo said about these demagogues. So it can be that that's really a maladaptation in practice. And path dependence trap is you are stuck with what worked in the past, but maybe are blind to what would work in this context. And epistemic autarky in a similar way, like using the mental models that have served you before, but you may not see what would be needed now. And then we would have the same type of patterns for the anti-adaptive side.Maybe I just say a few in the interest of time. So cognitive overflow, so you have too much capacity actually in that situation, and the rest of the organization may not follow. Chronoaversion, that's interesting. So meaning that the person may not be aware about it, but kind of does what is natural and doesn't really go with that clockwise or calendar-based chronological time, and so on and so forth. So you got the idea. So the idea was that we have these strategies and then the maladaptations and anti-adaptations per levels. The conclusion of all this is that adaptive leadership is vertically and metaphysically contextualized. So leadership shapes how we sense, make sense, use judgment and act, but leadership that is adaptive in one context or one level may be maladaptive or anti-adaptive in another context. So an adaptive leadership system is aligned across all levels. So, thank you.